Right now, the defense rests and Zimmerman never testified. We'll have the latest on his trial from Sanford, Florida. And next, will Spitzer make it onto the ballot? Now that he's thrown himself back into the spotlight, he's trying to get those signatures, but will New Yorkers believe that he's really sorry? And later, a controversial bill to restrict abortions in Texas is closer to becoming law, but this story isn't just about Texas. Coast to coast, efforts are underway to restrict access to abortions. We will have that update. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman in once again tonight for Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us on this Wednesday evening, July the 10th. We begin tonight with the George Zimmerman trial. The defense finished presenting its case today. The jury will soon begin deliberations, trying to figure out if George Zimmerman is guilty or innocent.
Have you made a decision?
Yes, Your Honor.
And what is your decision, sir?
After consulting with counsel, not to testify, Your Honor.
George Zimmerman, charged with second-degree murder in the death of Trayvon Martin, deciding not to take the stand in his own defense. His attorneys calling Zimmerman's father as their final witness, then resting their case on this, the 12th day of testimony.
Is this the way he described it?
The prosecution trying to prove today that if Martin attacked Zimmerman the way the defense described, Zimmerman wouldn't have been able to reach his gun.
This person, this mannequin, were carrying a firearm on their waist, where would the gun be right now in relation to me?
Would be at your left inner thigh.
Law enforcement training expert Dennis Root on the stand, backing Zimmerman's claim that he killed the 17-year-old in self-defense. Root testifying that Zimmerman had to shoot because he was being hurt and didn't have the physical skills to fight back.
If I was dealing with Chuck Norris, I would expect a completely different response to any kind of physical altercation than I would if I was dealing with Pee Wee Herman.
The defense starting the morning with a double blow, the judge deciding not to allow the jury to learn about text messages about fighting found on Trayvon Martin's cell phone.
The state's objection is sustained.
She also ruled this computer animation showing what George Zimmerman claims happened in his confrontation with Martin cannot be used as evidence. The jury could still see that animation in closing arguments, and at this pace, the case will certainly, it would appear, go to the jury this week. We could even see a verdict by the end of the week. For more on the case, let's bring in our panel on this. Toni Zimmer is joining us tonight. She is the president of the League of Women Voters of New Jersey. Welcome. Dominic Carter is here, political journalist and author. Richard Willstatter is here, criminal defense attorney, former president of the New York State Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Thanks so much for joining us. And Mayo Bartlett is with us again, former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. Let me start with the attorneys to my right. What do we make of the decision by the defense not to have George Zimmerman take the stand in his own defense?
I would say that that's an excellent decision, given the fact that the state has already put into evidence many of the statements from Mr. Zimmerman, both to the police and to other people. There are a variety of statements, and to call him as a witness now is just going to open him up to cross-examination that would be not helpful to him.
Mayo, the closest I get to a courtroom is, reruns of TV shows, basically. But you see a guy who's being tried for second-degree murder won't take the stand in his own defense. Isn't there some hint in a jury's mind, what's he got to hide?
Well, I think that you always have the right not to testify. But juries, I find, tend to want to hear your side of the story. And what's remarkable in this case in particular is that Zimmerman has testified unofficially. His attorney sought to bring him on to Fox News, where he gave that interview with Hannity, and lots of inconsistencies came out. Even though that's not sworn testimony, many of the jurors have seen that. Even sometimes when jurors tell you they don't watch TV, it's difficult to believe you really can insulate yourself entirely from the world around you. So if you hear certain things that are coming out from Mr. Zimmerman and they contradict each other, it's an opportunity for him to explain it. And now he doesn't have that opportunity, and although it shouldn't be held against him, sometimes I believe it would be.
What did you make of the physical maneuvering with the mannequin in court today, trying to show that the body positioning didn't quite work or fit Zimmerman's claims?
Well, I think that's an excellent tactic by the defendant. Whether it's going to work is another question. But they have to have an alternate view of the universe in order to make this case for the self-defense. So they want to show physically in every way possible, including the animation that they help to use in summation. It should be very interesting to see. All based on what Zimmerman says about what happened.
I'm curious, because you said alternate view of the universe to see this as self-defense. What has stood out to you as indicating that this was not a self-defense move by Zimmerman?
Well, the state's position, of course, is that Zimmerman approached somebody who was defenseless, who was committing no crime, started a fight with him, confronted him. This person defended themselves. They had no connection with Zimmerman whatsoever, and then Zimmerman ends up killing the person. So from the state's point of view, this is at least a manslaughter, if not a murder. From the defense point of view, which he's been well represented, he has a self-defense claim.
Mayo, I know you don't think second-degree murder is a likely, or the last time you were here, it didn't look as though second-degree murder was going to happen. There might be manslaughter, or there might be other possibilities.
Well, now it may end up being second-degree murder because apparently there's an attempt by the prosecution to call in rebuttal an ATF agent who was allegedly assaulted by Zimmerman several years earlier. And that contradicts him being some type of a wallflower. Also, when you look at the fact that he is very active in this neighborhood watch and carries a gun, he knew that he had a gun. Trayvon Martin didn't know whether he had a weapon. Trayvon Martin knew he did not himself have a weapon. The suggestion that Martin had to be on top was not fully explored by the prosecution. It was simply indicated that the gunshot showed that the bullet would have gone through close to the body. There was stippling on the body. The gun would have been a close-range shot. That doesn't necessarily mean anything about where the parties were positioned. So you can look at an autopsy report, you can look at ballistics, but it doesn't tell the full picture. I think it was an opportunity for Zimmerman to really tell them why he feared for his life. We've heard other people talk about what Zimmerman was thinking, but we don't have any idea what was in his actual mind. It was an opportunity for him to provide that information to the jury.
You know, looking back on the case and what we've heard so far, race and questions about race have really only come into this trial occasionally, talking about some of Zimmerman's previous stops or the concerns or the calls that he's made. I'm curious if you're surprised that it's been mentioned so infrequently in the trial, especially since that might appeal to a jury looking for a way to sort of condemn Zimmerman if they wanted to.
No, I would just say that that's like the pink elephant in the room. I mean, of course it's about race. And the fact that they're not talking about it just emphasizes that fact. And I can tell you this much, that as the mother of 2 African-American sons, when they were younger, they were profiled. They were profiled by the police department in our town in New Jersey. And it got so bad to the point where one of my sons was driving, well, he was a passenger. His girlfriend was driving, and she was white at the time, his girlfriend. And the police pulled him over. Well, they were looking at him when they pulled him over. They weren't looking at the driver. Oh, where are you guys going? You know, you going out tonight? I mean, so it got to the point where my husband, who is white, by the way, was just shocked. He said, you know, I've heard of profiling, but now I know it really does exist. And we ended up having to go into the police department with our sons and saying, listen, we live here, we pay taxes, our boys are good boys. You know, we're not going to put up with this anymore. So in our case, we managed to stem it. But, I mean, this is definitely profiling. He was told not to go after him. He's calling him, George Zimmerman is calling him a subject as though he were a criminal. He hadn't done anything wrong. So, you know, they're avoiding it because I think it's such a big deal.
And you know, Andrew, if you're a prosecutor in this case, you don't have to bring up race. You don't necessarily, I agree with your point, you don't have to bring that up as an issue. And the reason why we're not seeing him take the stand, I couldn't agree with the lawyers, the counsel here tonight more, because the fact of the matter is, if you put someone like Zimmerman on the stand, a first-year law student under cross-examination would absolutely destroy him and all of his alibis and stories. And, you know, when they're holding up this mannequin, yeah, that's great, but that mannequin is based on your version of what happened. The other guy that was there, there have been a few witnesses that saw bits and pieces, but the other guy that was there is no longer with us. So you can hold up these mannequins all you want, we'll never know Trayvon Martin's side of this story. But again, my point is that they're not going to get murder too. 6 women, we don't know on the jury, we don't know what they're thinking. They are going to get something. The judge is going to charge the jury in the morning. They concluded it just a few minutes ago. They have aggravated assault. There's a firearm charge. There's manslaughter. He's not walking out of that courtroom. They're going to nail him on something.
The judge did something interesting today. The judge basically forced Mr. Zimmerman's hand in terms of letting everyone know whether he intended to testify. And in my estimation, that's a mistake. I think that because you have the right not to testify, you're really reducing that right by asking him to declare whether he's going to testify before that time comes. And there would have been a time for the defense to rest. And if the defense has not yet rested, they shouldn't be forced to advise the court as to whether he's going to testify.
Well, on the other hand, if he changed his mind before the case rested, he could say, or before the defense rested, he could say, I changed my mind, I want to testify. But if he does testify, then he's going to open himself up to this cross-examination, and he's not going to be cross-examined by a first-year law student. He's going to be cross-examined by a very experienced state's attorney.
And just quickly, because we're about out of time, Richard, I'm curious, from what you've seen of the case so far, what do you expect in terms of a verdict?
I think it's quite possible that he could be acquitted. I think the defense has
of everything.
Of everything. I think the defense has done an admirable job for him, except for the joke in the beginning of the trial, which I hated. You know, there's a jury that I'm understanding there are no minority people on this jury.
One.
Okay. Well, you know, it's mostly white people on the jury, and you know, the defense has done a good job with this. You know, from what I've heard, there's a strong case for at least the aggravated manslaughter, but you know, I would not be shocked or surprised if there was an acquittal here.
All right. Well, we will see when the jury comes back. Richard Willstatter, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break here on RFL. In the meantime, we want to ask you to keep this conversation going online. Here's what you do. Head to Facebook or to Twitter, sound off. Will justice be served in the Zimmerman trial, however it is that you define justice in this case? Up next, Spitzer got a little teary-eyed talking about the life lessons he's learned lately, but will New Yorkers buy into his contrition tour or take that as a bit of crocodile tears? That is next. Stay with us.